podcast. I've actually let me start again. Welcome, Traci Philips on the Joyful Mate podcast. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you today?
Fantastic. It's so great to have you on. I've had you on the Me and My Health Up. I think we've done a trilogy on the Me and My Health Up, possibly from memory.
I know we've done two. We might have done
Okay.
three. It's been a little while, hasn't it?
It has been. It has been. So you're really keen to get your insights on happiness given your background. But just to bring the listeners of the Joyful Mate up to speed as to who you are, what you do, and a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I am an executive coach. I work with visionary founders, so entrepreneurial side of things, as well as C-suite individuals in the leadership, like the C-suite leadership level in corporate. And I started actually as an educator. So, a lot of what I was just telling somebody this earlier today is a lot of what I did as an educator was invite kids, because I worked with elementary school children. I created curriculum and taught French classes. And you would get these kids like, I can't do that. I'm not good at learning a foreign language. And my take was always, well, what are you good at? And we're going to use what you're good at in the process of learning French. And so that's a lot of what I do here now, in my work is really to kind of my clients extract the genius that's in them, the value that they have naturally and innately, and bring it forward in ways that they find and feel is valuable and fulfilling.
It's so important. I was having a conversation with Damien Christoph, and we spoke about the centenarians, the blue zones, and what brings them a whole lot of joy and fulfillment is having purpose and meaning. And that's essentially what you do in your profession, is help people find that purpose and make sure it's aligned to their their inner core, which is the values that are really important to them. So it's really important in terms of happiness is to find that purpose and meaning.
Absolutely. Well, and I feel like happiness in a lot of ways is a choice, but it's a tougher choice to make if we're caught kind of in this cycle of, am I fulfilling the value obligations of others, right? Am I being valuable in the way the world has told me to be valuable? So I find that it is tougher to make that choice to be happy when we don't have alignment in these areas. We have a natural, like innate way that we were developed, and well, not so developed, maybe more designed to be of value. And if that, for whatever reason, isn't aligned with the work we're doing or how we're showing up in the world, it can really throw off that ability to find that joy and happiness, or to choose that joy and happiness in our lives.
It's very true because some of these people can be very influential, and we look up to them, and we think that their opinions are more important than what we have in terms of our inner values, or what's important to us. And I think it's difficult for people growing up with these influential people being told what they should be doing and what they're good at and what's a good life. And yeah, so how do you yeah, so just on that, like, so people come to you and they're a bit lost, assume, bit rudderless, bit directionless, and that they're looking for that direction. How do you actually help them find that, I guess, that true north, or their, I think you've got a good term for it.
Their innate value.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Well, my company is, Anthony knows, is the innate coach. So that's where the innate piece comes in. But, oftentimes my client, like most of my clients, I think they feel like they have a sense of direction. That's why they're so confused at why they don't feel fulfilled. Right. So, or if they're happy in their lives, that we all use that kind of, well, I'm happy, but then you can hear in the voice that it's not maybe a full blown happiness. They're grateful, but they may not. There may be something that isn't quite aligned to what they want, or what they truly want to experience. And so, I actually have a variety of different models and procedures and assessments and things that I've developed that help people discover and define and then better articulate, um, four main areas. That's their, well, I call it the what, how, where, and why process. And the what is there innate value? I mean, most of us think of our value in terms of what I consider a secondary value is our learned and earned skill sets. So these are the acquired value traits, right? The things we learned once we came out. We were born into the world and we started to interface with the world and learn things and experience things. And we develop skills based on that. But then there's the innate gifts that we were actually born with that we really didn't have to hustle or work to have. They're kind of like superpowers. And so it's hard for us to sometimes recognize those because we're not focused on them. Our conditioning doesn't have us focused on those things. And in many cases, we don't recognize them because we're taught this thing that it's not valuable unless you work hard at it. So if you didn't have to, work hard to develop that value, then it's not as valuable. So innate value traits are oftentimes overlooked for that reason. But defining that and then how we want to, what is the ideal way that we also kind of were designed to deliver that value into the world? Because not everybody's here to deliver their value the same way. We have shy people, we have more outgoing people, we have people that like it behind the scenes, we like people who like to be out in front. We have people who like to be in partnership, we have other people that like to work alone. So the way we deliver our value is different. And as long as it's aligned with our authenticity, right, then we tend to succeed at what we do. But if it's not, then sometimes we may wonder why. We're doing all the things we were told to do, but it's not aligned to our true delivery, um, natural delivery system. And so that's the second part. And then the third part is the where, which is environments and experiential. Um, how do I explain it? Like ways in which we like to experience things. And so the where words are more words that describe environments and experiences that best support us to be at our best, right? So when we're at our best, when we're most, in our natural form, we're going to perform better. And there are going to be those traits of those environments and experiences that, serve us better. And then the last one is why. And of course, it's important to know why we're doing what we're doing. Many people, when we ask the question why, ultimately, that's where they start to find all the rest of it comes together. Like, oh, that's why I don't feel as joyful and fulfilled as I would like, is because I think I've been operating on a why that isn't really my natural, authentic why. I've been trying to please other people, or I've been trying to, do what my organization expects of me as a leader, or whatever that happens to be. And they start to realize that somehow the missing common denominator is themselves and their own way of being.
Yeah, because they could have easily seen a leader before them that did it. They achieved huge amounts of success in that role, but that they were just doing it their way, and they think they need to copy that way in order to be successful, as opposed to doing it in their own unique way.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what's in terms of joy and happiness? What is it to you?
Mm, well, that's, and gosh, that's a multifaceted question, isn't it? For me, I do, as I said before, I feel like happiness and joy is a choice. I mean, it's just like anything else. And it's something that is a constant moving, breathing practice, right? When I think a lot of times, because we live in kind of mm, conditioned ways of understanding, when something feels good, it is good. When something feels bad, it is bad. And many times, if our emotions don't feel good, we label that bad. And we can either marinate too much in that, or we can do the opposite and try to push it away and you know, um, gratitude it away sometimes too. It's like, oh, I'm not, I don't like that feeling. I don't want to feel that feeling. So I'm just going to focus on what I'm grateful for. And I'm going to focus on, throwing myself into things that make me feel happy and to hopefully pull me out of that. And I actually don't feel that really any of those things should be ignored because I feel they're all data points, right? What I teach in my coaching is that we have four different intelligences. They all comprise what I call our inner guidance system. And that inner guidance system is there literally to do what it says, is to guide us, is to help us make decisions. And each of those intelligences collect data points. So they're head, heart, gut, and intuition. And the head data is thoughts. And when we're processing them, we are thinking. The heart brain is feelings, and when we're processing that data, we are in our, I'm sorry, they're emotions, and when we're processing that data, we're feeling. The gut brain is sensations, right? The data points that the gut brain collects are what we call sensations. And when we're processing that data, we're sensing. And the last one, the intuition, is is there is a gnosis, right? That it's an all-knowing kind of idea about intuition, is when we get this gnosis, this knowing on some level we can't explain. We are grokking, which is this term that explains taking in kind of the quantum fields data and processing it. And so, really, when we're feeling a certain way, whether that's positive or negative, it's data. And if we don't learn to sit with that, we never get that data, right? That data kind of is not available to us. And so part of what I, work with my clients to understand is what are those intelligences trying to tell them? Because what I find, those who really start to learn what they mean and how to utilize them, there's a new level of clarity, and with that clarity comes wonderment, and from wonderment comes joy, and gratitude, and happiness. Even, it's like, wow, I never would have seen that piece of information if I hadn't gone through the process of really sitting with it. um, so I think happiness can be a simple choice, right? I'm gonna choose to experience through the lens of happiness. But then that's a constantly, like I said, something that we're constantly needing to work with. And part of how I think about and work with my clients and myself on working, to be happy and joyful, is to utilize my four intelligences to help me, into that space of clarity, which I find in when I experience it, it does bring a natural joy.
Yeah, you raise a really interesting point, and that's the sitting with it. And I think that's where people, the disconnect today is that they're not willing to sit with it. They're looking for immediate fix, and and it's like a short term, gratifying thing to get them to feel better, but they're not really sitting with it to allow that connection between the brains that you mentioned, and really understand what's the why am I feeling this way, and to reflect and to work through it, because if we do that, we get to know ourselves better. And you mentioned earlier on this authentic self. Well, if we're constantly feeling uneasy and then going to seek immediate gratifying things to escape the way we're feeling, we never have that connection with who we are. We're constantly trying to think, oh no, I shouldn't feel this way, and run away from that emotion, in essence. So do, what do you think of that in terms of this, I guess, like seeking happiness from a short-term gratifying point of view, as opposed to a more finding an underlying current of a level of fulfillment, that is going to bring more long-term, but requires working on self in order to find it?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. Well, and the chasing concept is definitely a big one. And I think the concepts in our lives, joy being one of them, have certain expectations attached to them, right? If I'm joyful, I am to, this is how I'm going to feel, or this is what's going on in my life, or, so I think a lot of times we also unbeknownst to ourselves, much of the time unconsciously, we're we're seeking joy through a particular expectational lens. And joy can come even in the deepest of sorrows, right? We can actually hold more than one emotion at a time.
Yeah.
We can be deeply sad
Yes.
and in full joy at
Yeah.
the same time. I mean, I kind of felt that my mother passed away recently, and I kind of had moments of that, and as I was kind of processing my grief, still am. It's been only a year, but really deep in it, I also would experience so much of what she brought to my life, which brought me so much joy and gratitude. So I think a lot of it's this polarized, like, this is like what I said before, this is good, that's bad. If it feels good, it's good. If it feels bad, it's bad. And if we're not feeling a certain way that's good, we somehow feel that joy is not accessible to us. And so it's really a belief system that rolls itself in that ability to allow ourselves to feel the feeling. But to your point of wanting to only be comfortable all the time, and not being able to sit with it, I have a lot of people at first when we're learning how to collect data, they're like, okay, so what am I doing here? Like what am I sitting with exactly? And they have some great questions. It's great. I mean, because again, to your point, nobody really teaches us to do this. Like, okay, you're feeling sorrow, sit with it. Okay, so how long do I sit with it? Or like, what do I talk to it? Do I? there's there's all this because again, we're so conditioned to look outside and have other people kind of take our hand and walk us through this process that we don't trust that we already know. If we just say, okay, I said it. So sometimes I tell people, I said, okay, I just want you to set a timer for 10 minutes and just sit and feel what you feel. Well, what am I feeling? I don't know. You'll know when you sit there. You may find you sit there for 10 minutes, you don't really know what you're feeling. That's okay. We're just getting started. So there's this natural training, but I wouldn't begin to tell people what to do because everybody's different. And what I really want people to do is get more comfortable with themselves, get more comfortable in trusting that they have this innate knowing of what to do when they go and sit there for 10 minutes. There's some aspect of them, there's some unconscious parts of them that know what to do. They've just been so conditioned and trained and controlled by their consciousness that those unconscious places haven't really had an opportunity to emerge into a conscious knowing, right? In other words, we don't know that part of ourselves consciously. And so we really, you said it best, like we really just need to give ourselves the space and the opportunity to discover ourselves and trust that. I mean, when we were kids, we weren't like, at least my generation, when parents are like, go play. And we went playing in the forest, and we didn't know where we were going. It's not like we're like, oh, we're going to go to this. I mean, we're just discovering our way through it all. We weren't afraid or fearful. And we weren't constantly questioning, well, should I go left? Should I go right? We just bumbled through the forest and found our way to wherever we got ourselves in trouble or didn't. But we were learning. And that's how we learned how to navigate our environment. And that's what oftentimes people are talking about. The younger generations these days, they don't have those skills because they haven't had the opportunity to bumble through life. Everything's been very controlled and kind of managed for them. And that's given them, safety, and it's given them security, but it hasn't given them the ability to know how to trust themselves in the world. So there does need to be that happy balance, I think.
Yeah, you've brought up so many good points there. Looking for which one's the best one to follow on with. But you mentioned expectations, and like there's this illusion that people hold on to is that they should always be happy, right? Happiness is like a constant state. But happiness is a fleeting state, and it comes and goes. And for me, it's like if we had a constant state of happiness, then what is happening? You wouldn't feel anything, right? Because it's just there all the time.
Just be our
So,
sense of
yeah,
being. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Yeah, like like we can really experience happiness is through like we've experienced a period of sorrow or sadness or whatever, and then and then we have these ups of feeling good, and that's life is that roller coaster of ups and downs and bumps, and it's not constant.
And there's data in all of it. There's information in all of it. And that's why we have the emotions. Is for the information, not the emotion itself. I mean, yes, it is to experience the highs and lows, and I mean that's what I believe it's what we came here for, is to have a variety of experiences in life, not just have the same feeling all the way through, our lifetime. And yet, in each of those emotions are data points, and those data points have, just like any information, has vital, pieces to our puzzle that are being provided for us, and we can push them away and disregard them and not want to gather those. But so there's two things that are important in leadership. Well, there's many things that are important in leadership, but two of the main ones I focus on in my coaching is communication and decision making. And if we think about that, where are most of the problems in today's world? They fall into one of those two categories.
Yeah.
right? Because if I am the culmination of every single decision I've ever made in my lifetime, this is me as every decision I've made. What I do for a living, who I'm married to, who my friends are, where I live, all boils down to the decisions I made before at this minute that I'm in. And then communication, where are most often their critical problems in dynamics, is because of miscommunication. So when we look at these two things, both of them are very, very highly tied to a need to have the right kind of information, right? And when I say we have four intelligences that all have access to different types of information, when we go to make informed decisions, if we're just focusing, let's say, on our cognitive brain, our logical brain, then if we have four intelligences, at best, we're making decisions based on a fourth of the available information. Our other three, the information from our other three intelligences are being factored in. If the simple math in that is, I'm here to tell you, you're not going to make the best decisions because
Hmm.
you have three-fourths of the information available to you missing from that
Yeah.
decision, right? So part of it is in decision making. I said it's really important that we pay attention to this data that our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, and our intuition is telling us, so that we're making better decisions, which will lead to, hopefully, also, if we have more information, it's easier to tie that information together to have better communication. Because again, a lot of miscommunication is because we're misinformed in some way, um, or not as informed as we really need to be or could be.
So, what do you do to foster, daily happiness, joy, fulfillment? What are the things that you do on a regular basis that bring you that level of satisfaction,
I mean,
contentment?
the first thing is I try not to put too much pressure on the concept of needing to be happy. I mean, you said it before, like we have this kind of fixation on happiness and being in this state of joy, and so I kind of don't see it as any more important than any other of my emotions, and so I think treating it equally is a healthy thing, at least for me. Is that I appreciate it when it's available, and I look at it, through the lens of both appreciation, but also through what is it informing me, right? What is this joy telling me? Um, and partnering with it, but also too, just, I think I'm humbled to the fact oftentimes that I don't have as much control over what comes into my life as I think, right? Or that I may have otherwise wanted to believe. Things can happen. You can have the best intentions and make the best plans, and they can all go sideways. And so for me, cultivating happiness or joy is really about reminding myself that it isn't in my expectations and my ability to control my circumstances that I have joy. It is in my choice of applying that particular meaning, that I give to anything, that will give me the opportunity to find joy at the end of it, if that makes sense, right? So it's setting the stage based on the meaning I give whatever it is I'm experiencing, that gives me more accessibility to joy in the end, or less accessibility to joy in the end. And so I was telling this story in my podcast earlier today. I don't know if you know who Ram Dass is,
No, I
but
don't.
Ram Dass is an author, a poet, and he tells a story about in India how they trap um, monkeys, is they put nuts in a jar, and the jar is fixated, affixed to something that doesn't move. And when the monkey puts its hand into the jar to grab the nuts, and it tries to pull its hand back out, it can't because it has a fist. And all the monkey really needs to do to be free is release the nuts. But he or it is attached to those nuts in that jar, and so they pull and pull and they struggle and struggle, but they're caught in their very attachment. So when we attach ourselves to things, that's where we struggle and suffer. Is what Ram Dass's point was. Is it's in our decision to be attached to something. So whether we're overly attached to joy, whether we're overly attached to money, whether we're overly attached to a relationship, to our careers, when those things don't go as planned, we then naturally feel like we don't have what we want in that, right? So if we are fixated to a concept of joy and happiness that has to come through a particular experience, then it's like the monkey with the hand in the jar, right? When it doesn't happen that way and we suffer in that situation, right? We can't grasp joy or happiness. It has nothing to do with our ability to grasp joy or happiness. It has to do with our attachment to the meaning we're giving.
It's so
So for me,
true.
I try to be aware of where because we're all conditioned, and it's most of it's unconscious, is if I'm really struggling and I want to feel that joy, but I'm not, then there's something that I have my hand in that jar, right? I'm somehow attached to something that is blocking me from joy, which is always available to me.
And it really comes back to that earlier point that you said, that they're always entangled. It's always there. It's because we're fixated or attached to seeing it one way. Like you mentioned, that missing information around, like, in that moment, if I choose to focus on this aspect of it, it makes me feel this way. But also in that moment, there's other information there that I haven't looked at. And if I then chose to look at that other information, that could shift the way I feel, because that, like, for me, that, when we get an emotion, it's telling us that we have some sort of attachment, and there's an element of missing information. If we're aware of the full perspective, as you said, like, in one moment, you can experience sadness and joy at the same time, and you've been through that over the last year, and they're always entangled. It's just, as you said, if we have a certain expectation and attachment to the form it needs to be in, if it's not in that form, we're going to be disappointed. And it's like,
Yes. We're not going to see the real way to it. We're going to be blind to the way to it because the actual way to it wasn't the expected way to it.
mm,
And we're fixated on only seeing, it's like the blinders, right? We're
yeah.
only seeing the expected way and it's not working, that we're completely blind to the actual way.
Yeah, it's like, for me, everyone can relate to COVID, and you saw the polarization in terms of the way people experience COVID. We all experienced the same event, right? But some people said, "Oh, this is great, I love it. I love this about it. This is awesome," and then others going, "This is the worst thing in the world. It's taken this away from me, taking this." So it was really coming down to, the way we, perceive it, information, and as you said, that all depends on our conditioning and our belief systems and how we're filtering the situation. But the situation was, it was COVID, right? It wasn't, that it was a bug that was,
It
you know.
was. And it did affect us differently. I mean, some people lost everything. They lost their jobs, their homes in some cases. I mean, some people died, and so people did experience it differently, I think, because the actual reality of how it affected their lives was different. But to what you're saying, I think is, and this is where it becomes critical. It's where it's difficult. It's one thing to be in this mindset shift thing where we're like, we just need to shift our mindset. It's another thing when we're in the squeeze and things are literally falling away. And I'm seeing that a lot now with people because there's, here in the United States, especially because we're under new administration and there's some radical changes being made very quickly, and it's affecting people, in very substantial ways. And so I'm seeing that, people who I've been coaching for a while who have learned some of these techniques of extrapolating the data from their different intelligences and utilizing said data to really get more clarity on what their opportunity is in the moment, with a given piece of information. Um, their ability to, even in the squeeze, even in the crucial moments where things seem to be falling away, they have this clarity of action that they can take because they're not just reacting based on one set of data, if that makes sense, right? And one set of data could be saying, oh my gosh, I'm losing my house. The other set of data, your heart says, I kind of have wanted to move anyway,
Yeah.
and now I'm free of all of the clutter. And I mean, yes, it's not great that all my stuff is gone away, but I mean, I can start anew. And my heart maybe is telling me something different. And that's where head and heart can oftentimes be like this with one another. But if we're at least aware, right? Oh, my head's telling me this, my heart's telling me this, my gut's telling me this, and they may all four be saying something different. The answer, if we want to call it that, is somewhere, when you see the Venn diagrams and the part where they all overlap is the sweet spot. The answer is somewhere there where they overlap. And we can find it so much easier if we're aware of all of this data and we know kind of how to utilize it to say it's not about one particular part of this experience that I'm having. It's about, recognizing where it all kind of meets in the middle, and that kind of crucial bit that I have, to capitalize on if I choose to.
And just getting back to that earlier point we've discussed, it's really sitting with it as opposed to running away from the emotion. It's really looking and seeing, like, why am I experiencing feeling this way, and then connecting in, as you said, with the missing information is, what am I not seeing, that's there. And like, if it, if they're just experiencing that it's all going to have a negative impact into, you know on them, it's how is it benefiting them? They haven't looked at that perspective. And as you said, the minute they start focusing on that perspective, oh, I have wanted to move, yeah, so this is just a catalyst. And now, I'm going to now create my own space, and let go of all the clutter, and yeah. And so then they start to see the a bigger perspective, or a much whole perspective.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Yeah, well, and we're wired for negative expectancy. I mean, it's in our
Mm,
biology. It's our exit strategy, so that
mm,
we're always, prepared. It's like kind of that survival reaction, an instinct within us. But I've been talking more and more about, from a place of curiosity, like what would it be to kind of rewire ourselves to positive expectancy,
mm,
right? What state would our for intelligence need to be in for us to be more wired naturally to positive expectancy? And so on the survival level, obviously, and in unconscious, we're left to our default, will be in negative. But what I was really thinking about is, well, if the head and heart are kind of usually the ones that are battling the most, for positive expectancy to be our state, or our norm, our head would have to be in a state of curiosity,
mm,
and our heart would have to be in a state of gratitude,
mm,
because both of those states are open,
mm,
right? And positive expectancy is open to what we don't know. And then
mm,
we're really being challenged in that space ever since COVID, because
mm,
so much of what we've all been experiencing is not, in some cases, things we've ever experienced before.
mm.
But there's also a lot of uncertainty and
Yeah.
so much change happening so fast. And so to be able to stay open during that time where we just want to wall ourselves in and dukes up and protect ourselves from all of this unknown is definitely a challenge. But I do find, again, if we go back to where we were as children, children are naturally curious. That's why they learn so much so fast. And, I think also too, we have this natural gratitude about us. We may not always show it, but there's this kind of awe and wonderment that is early stage gratitude, where it's just like we're open to just like, wow, the world is just this amazing place. If we can cultivate those spaces, even in our most uncomfortable times of uncertainty, that's when, again, it starts to take, it's like that snowball effect. You start to roll a little bit of a ball, and then as it goes downhill, it just gets bigger and bigger, and it becomes easier for us to have these perspectives faster. And even in some of the most challenging situations, I mean, I experienced it doing this work, the end part from September 2023 to January of 2024. We went through a series of losses in my family that was just one right after another. My daughter in a near fatal car accident. 2 weeks later, a brand new puppy that we got died. 2 weeks after, my mother went into the hospital, and then January passed away. And what I found, because I had been cultivating everything we're talking about here, is that it didn't keep me from having those challenging emotions, right? And having to navigate some really hard places. But what it did allow me was so much more rich data to work from. Like so much more. Sorry, I'm getting call bombed here. um, so much more to go off of that gave me a higher, deeper perspective.
Mm.
Right. So I wasn't just in the kind of reality of the superficial reality of that experience. I was getting information that really helped, you said it best, is give more of a holistic experience. Because when you're struggling or suffering or hurting, it's a very grounding
Mm.
experience. It brings you to the what is exactly what you're feeling in that moment, which is a state of presence, and that's a good thing, even if it's an uncomfortable thing. um, but also too, ways to cope with that. We can use things that distract us, but we can also use actual data,
Mm.
right, to help us. I mean, with my mom, there were a lot of moments of gratitude. Like, we just kind of happened to be with her a week before she passed away, and that wasn't planned. And so there's these moments of like, gosh, thank goodness we had that time. And when we look at what we did with that time, it was incredible. Like, she told all these stories she had never told to my daughter about when she was growing up. And I mean, that was the last opportunity she would have ever had to do that. And so you can't help but, although there's the grief, there's also that's amazing,
Mm.
right? We're so grateful for that. So I think that helped me. It really did. And as I find our work often does, we do it because we need it most.
Yeah.
And as we learn to navigate it, we can share that with the world. But I have to believe that that's what started the Joyful podcast. Is, you want more joy and happiness in your own life, and then that allows these conversations so that other people can share and more people can learn.
Yeah, like for me, the Joyful Mate podcast really arose from uh, just having, well, being blessed or grateful for the mental health that I've had. Uh, and for me, it was then, well, how do I help others, to get to this sort of state of mind? And so that, yeah, the Joyful Mate really just comes about giving back in terms of, I've got this great mental resilience and way of seeing things, and feel very fulfilled, and love waking up every morning and bounce out of bed. And yeah, so the Joyful Mate podcast is really about helping others find that, but getting, not just from my perspective, getting a holistic lens of joy, fulfillment. And that's what you've brought to this discussion, is your perspective, your experience, your knowledge, gnosis, all that has come to fruition, and you're sharing it from a different perspective. And I know the listeners will think, you're making, incredible sense. And I'm really connecting with what Traci's saying. And so it hopefully is helping the listeners in that way, is because, yeah, they may not relate to the way I see the world, but they may better relate to your experiences and the way you've dealt with, situations in your life, and help navigate your way out of it. And so, yeah, that's really what I'm seeking to do through this podcast, and getting experts on like yourself, and just anyone that can, share their experience, really, because as you know, with joy, fulfillment, and happiness, we're completely unique specimens and species and special superpowers, as you mentioned before, that we need to allow that. Like, so there's not, like, happiness hasn't got a boxed in definition. It's so broad, and as you said, it's a can of, like, it's massive. There's no boundaries. And so I don't want to put a boundary on it and say this is the state of which, if you do this, it's like the Huberman hacks. If you do all the Huberman hacks, you'll be super healthy and live forever. That's not the case. It's like everyone's unique and special. And so they need to find what works for them. Same with joy and happiness. People need
Yeah,
to find what works for them.
absolutely. Well, and I think that health is the same way, as we oftentimes chase it, right? Or take it for granted when we're younger, and then we're chasing it when we're older.
Yes. Yeah.
But if we can, I think if we can. So my favorite word, I don't know if you do this, like, ever, talk to people who, like, this is my word for the year.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
and I think the one that, if I were to say and choose a word, it's the one I'm talking about the most, and it's partnership.
Okay.
And what is that concept of true blue partnership? Like, if we really talk about kind of that reciprocity, or reciprocal kind of, and it doesn't always mean equal is what we're talking about, because everybody brings different things to the table at different times. But partnership, in really a true partnership, is not focused on the other member of the partnership. It's focused on growing and developing and strengthening the partnership itself. It's kind of like a marriage, right? Like two people focused on one another, and you need to make me happy and you need to make me happy. That's what's called codependency. When, if they're focused kind of like a bank account, if we focus on the relationship and they're pouring into the relationship like we would a bank account, it's going to have enough for both of us. But it's that same thing here, is that partnership, when we partner with people or situations, like, if I have something that happens to me in life and it's triggering something in me, oftentimes I think about this thing is partnering with me. What is it bringing to the partnership? Right. And because I don't like it doesn't necessarily mean it's not good for me, or it's not
Yeah.
something that I could learn that could strengthen me or improve me in some ways. And so I think thinking through the lens of partnership, it helps me, especially when people show up and they really they really trigger you in ways that are uncomfortable. When you think of them as a soul partner in life instead of like your adversary, it changes that experience. Yeah,
Yeah,
it really does.
absolutely. Because what you're sharing there is, what are they here in my life to teach me, and how am I going to grow from this? And so you're open to receiving that growth. And as you said, it's about aligning the brains, and the brains need to be open for communication, right? And so I think it's fantastic how you see it as a soul partnership. It's, I really want to be deeply connected with you. I need to be open to receiving. I need to be open to better understanding who you are, and that's going to teach me something about myself, because what was holding that back prior was judgment, right? I was,
Totally.
yeah, yeah,
Totally. And we can have some really interesting experiences. I had one today where it was somebody who reached out to me on LinkedIn, and he's a writer, and I think he was kind of trying to sell this concept of writing content. And as we're going along, I pushed back on something. He says, well, it needs to be like this. I said, well, that hasn't been my experience. And he immediately was like, well, this is, so you're saying this isn't going to work for you? I said, oh no, that's not what I said at all. I just said that hasn't been my experience. And he made this whole story up. He says, well, obviously this conversation is, I can't try to convince you of this. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? I don't know what relate or conversation you're having, but I'm very open. I just, pushed back because that wasn't my experience. I wasn't discounting what you're saying in general. I was just saying that that's different. So it is to the point of judgment. I think our egos can get really bruised if we're too much in that. If that person doesn't hear me as I want to be heard, or if that person doesn't agree with me, in the same way, that somehow that's not a good fit, that person is wrong, that whatever meaning we give it, we judge it. It can really shut us off from these partnerships, these potentials to have some rich dialogue. People really struggle with people with things and concepts that are different from themselves, and that is where we become one-sided, right? We can't open ourselves up to all of our intelligences because we're shutting off certain of those that are going to be necessary for us, or for us to get that information. It's going to be necessary for us to be open to having diversity, right, in our interactions. So yeah, it all factors back to joy,
yeah,
because joy is a sense of being, I think, wowed with the world. I find, it's almost wonderment to me. That's how I experience joy. It's kind of like, wow, you just can't make that up. Like, there's something so much bigger than me at play here, and that was pretty amazing that I got to just experience that thing. That's what joy feels like to me in my body.
yeah, yeah. There's that element that comes back to the forest, right? That curiosity, right? If I go this way, I wonder where this is going to take us. Is it going to be the enchanted woods? And if I go this way, will I run into a grizzly bear? What? I don't know. It's which path are we going to take? And I think that's very much how in terms of what you've shared, is being open, relies on the exploration to go to areas that we haven't been to before, or places we haven't explored. And then there's going to be an element of uncertainty, an element of fear, an element of being uncomfortable. But as you said, the more you step into that space, the more it becomes comfortable that there's an element of uncertainty with everything we do, even the
So,
decisions. Yeah. So even the decisions we've made before that we think, yeah, I'll get this outcome, not guaranteed, right? That's,
and I really honestly believe that's the time we're in, is realizing that we never really had the control that we thought we had. We've
Mm,
never really had the ability to know what we thought, because I mean, now, I mean, I've seen plenty of things in the news and otherwise that have come out that it's like up is down and down is up and good is bad and bad is good, and and all these things. And so I really feel like what that's training us to do is recognize that not everything is polarized, not everything
mm,
is black and white, not
mm,
everything is as it seems. What do they say? Don't judge a book by its cover, and that's important, because it doesn't mean we don't have the ability to discern and know what we have in front of us. It's just not going to come in the way we thought, right? These all these ways that we've been trained to figure things out is very one dimensional, and we're finding that one dimensional is just not cutting it. It's not showing all the goods. And so I think it's an invitation to go in and understand more of our really, I mean, superpowers that we
yeah,
have, to be able to tell if something is for us, if it isn't, if it's safe, if it's not, if and but part of that is we have to be uncertain to what we've learned before. We have to
mm.
be comfortable with the uncertainty of what we learned before, so that we can learn this kind of new language of sorts, and I think in that we will make ourselves much more available to feelings like joy and gratitude and happiness.
Wow, what great concluding words, Tracy. I really appreciate your insights that you shared in this discussion. I know we could talk for many more hours on this, but
Easily, couldn't we?
I, you've covered such great ground in terms of what joy and happiness is, and how people can foster more into it into their lives by looking at changing their perspective, or at least spending some time with the uncomfortableness, and really being open to the feelings, and what it's there to teach us, and what how we can then change our perspective, which could then also alter the feelings that we're experiencing in that moment. So there's been such terrific insight. Tracy, how can the listeners best connect with you?
Well, almost everything that you can find through my website, and that's theinnatecoach.com. But also, I mean, I'm on most of the platforms. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. And I love hearing from people. I also have a podcast that's bi-weekly called Eavesdrop in the Moment. People can find that on YouTube or Facebook under Eavesdrop in the Moment. So those are all ways people can reach out. And again, I really appreciate you inspiring these dialogues. I mean, we always do have a really good time, don't we, when we talk about things, and at so many levels. But I give you a lot of credit for your desire to create a platform where people can come together and share their ideas.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you for putting aside your time and sharing your wisdom and gnosis with the Joyful Mate listeners. Really appreciate it. And to the listeners, please share it with others that you believe that will benefit from Tracy's wisdom today that she shared. So please share it far and wide and get it out there, because this is all about spreading joy, happiness, and fulfillment. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.